All right, guys. So we are getting close to the end, guys. So yesterday we talked about, or today, yesterday's notes and today's talk in class was about the chain rule. Okay. So we talked about the chain rule. And just remember it's the derivative of the outside and then times the derivative of the inside. And they call it the outside inside rule or the inside outside rule. I don't know. I don't call it that. But we call it the chain rule. So if we have x plus 2 to the ninth power, we we end up with 9, the derivative of this thing, times x plus the quantity x plus 2, 9 minus 1 is 8, times the derivative of the inside, which is 1. Okay. And so it'd be 9x plus 2 to the 8. That's the chain rule. So these rules are there to understand that the derivative, to understand that we don't have to do our big, long definition of a derivative. People have done that for us when we didn't have computers. So therefore, this is what we showed of how we find the derivative, but these guys, dy dx, oops, and y prime and f prime and all those are the shortcuts to this guy. In those shortcuts, we end up with rules. Remember, the quotient rule is a derivative, so you're finding the slope of a tangent line. All right, so let's talk about the product rule and the quotient rule. So the first one is the product rule, and just like it says, so it's funny. You're going to see all these books. It says like Rule 5. In another calculus book, that would be like Rule 27. Who knows what they are? So disregard these rule numbers and theorem 2.27 or whatever. It is literally the product rule. The product rule means multiplication. So we're talking about multiplying. So we have the idea that when we multiply things together, we have a rule that'll make it a little bit easier. So the idea is this. So here's our idea. I'm going to write this a little differently. This is saying the derivative of function u times v is the same as u times the derivative of v with respect to x plus v with the derivative of u with respect to x. So I'm going to write it a little differently for you. If we have function u times function v, that's going to be equal to u times v prime plus v times u prime. Okay? So that's really what it means. I always show you guys all the different ways it's going to show up. So that's one way you're going to see it. Another way is f of x times g of x, right? If I want to find the derivative of those, I am going to write it as f of x that does not belong there. So erase that one right there, guys. And times g prime of x plus g of x times f prime of x, or f times g prime plus g times f prime. There's so many ways to write these things, all right? So that's kind of the idea behind the product rule. Now, so I don't know why it's doing these weird little chunks right here. So let's just talk about this. Now, when we take the derivative, so let me write it as u times v, right? So I want to do the derivative of u times v. When I do this and I do u times v prime plus v times u prime. Here's the rub. All right, it's a new word, the rub. This can be the power rule. This can be the chain rule. This can be a trig function like sine and cos. So it can be anything, any derivative rule that we've learned. It can be one of those. Same thing here. This could be the power rule. This could be the chain rule. This could be anything. Okay, so it could be trig. It could be a trig function. It could be any type of derivative. So be ready for those. That's why we've been doing them in small chunks. Okay. All right. So let's do the product rule in practice. So look at here. I have f of x. F of x is x to the third minus 4 times the quantity x squared plus 3. Granted, you guys can multiply this out and come up with this piece right here, right? And you're going to end up, you'll get all sorts of stuff, and you'll take the derivative. All that you can do it all sorts of ways, but we're going to use this one because you guys can handle this one with what you know. I set it up differently than this, so let me show you how I set this up. I label this one u, and this one v. Or, you ready for this? You can label this one f and this one g. Doesn't matter. I'm doing u and v because that's usually the most common piece. So, let's do this. U is equal to x cubed minus 4. U prime is equal to 3x squared. Took the derivative of this using the power rule. Then I go over and I have v here. Yeah, my v's and u's are kind of ugly. It's x squared. I don't like that. It's x squared plus 3. So my v prime is the power rule to this, which is 2x. So now I've got to use my product rule. My product rule, if you remember, use the product rule. The product rule is u. You know what? I'm going to do that in a different color because I can. Is u times v prime plus v times u prime. Well, looky here. U times v prime. U prime times v. So we just can literally multiply these things. This is u. This is v prime. This is v. And this is u prime. And then we just clean it all up. And so we end up with, we distribute this in, and we end up with 2x to the fourth power minus 8x plus 3x to the fourth plus 9x squared. 5x to the fourth plus 9x squared minus 8x is our derivative, which could be dy over dx. Or it could be f prime. Or it could be y prime. Or it is the slope of the tangent line at any point. Okay? All right, so that is the product rule, guys. So I'll throw a couple of examples and we'll just kind of make sure we understand it tomorrow. So now the quotient rule. The quotient rule like messes people's brains up. Okay? It totally does. It messes my brain up half the time because I always, one year I taught it completely backwards. So that's no bueno. Okay? So here it is. So the quotient rule. And I'm going to write it as U's and V's, guys. Oops, I'm using the wrong spot here. Let me move my book out of the way. Let me move my book, and we will get that all set up. So this is the way I keep writing on I keep writing on my mouse pad, not this. All right, so we're going to do the idea that this is going to be when we have U divided by V. We have V squared on the bottom. Now, this is the quotient rule. We're dividing, so the word quotient means divide. So when you see the division, this is super helpful sometimes. So I start with v squared, so I'm going to square the bottom. And this is how I'm able to remember how this works. Since I have v squared here, v goes first, u prime goes second. Then I subtract u times v prime. Okay? Kind of see how that works? Square the v, then only use one of them to start it. That's the easiest way to remember it. All right, so now let's tackle this. So I always label these things. U equals x cubed minus 4. U prime equals 3x squared. V equals x squared plus 3. I'm running out of room. And I'm not, because all I got to do is shrink it. I'm not very smart today, am I? All right, there we go. And then v prime is equal to 2x. So this is all the information I need. You will get points for this, even if you screw this up, all right? So now, remember, this is saying find that f prime. To find f prime of x, I have to take the derivative of u over v. Looky here. This is v. This is u prime minus u and v prime all over v squared. So this is really not learning anything new other than the quotient rules and the product rules, guys. And this get a while to get used to. So then again, we do our algebra. And I'm going to change it up on you guys. And we'll do green. And then we're going to take this one. And we're going to distribute it in here. And we're going to take this 2x and distribute it in. And then we're going to leave, notice, we leave this one as is. Don't do any extra work that you don't have to do. We're going to distribute that in. When we distribute it in, we get a nice, beautiful polynomial. That cleans up, and there's my answer. Guess what? I'm going to say it again. This is f prime. It's also y prime. It's also dy dx. It's also the slope of the tangent line. Kind of keep driving that idea home. All right, guys? So that is the quotient rule. So on top of, we talked about the negative integer ones, bringing the negative up. I realized after I put this one in there, it talks about rule 7 and stuff. So just, we're going to ditch that idea. It's just not that big of a deal. We've already done this. When we have an exponent here, just remember that means that it's an x squared on the bottom. So if we want to go backwards, this is negative 1 times x to the negative 2. That's all that means. So when we're dealing with this here, we have to convert it to a negative exponent, and then you get your power rule with it. So just kind of make sure we understand that. Oh, look, when you find the derivative, look, that's the derivative, which is also f prime, which is also dy dx. And lo and behold, it is the slope of the tangent line. I don't know. I just kind of feel like saying that all the time. All right. So that is the basic on the product rule. I'm going back here. So we really need to hone in on this right here today. Boom, that one. And we really need to hone in on the product rule, which is written right. Oh, I wrote it in 14 different spots. Right here. That's the big one. Okay. And these are on your reference sheet that I gave you guys. Now, let's go back. I know you guys are like probably twitching because you can't. I'm flipping it everywhere. So this is called, y prime is called the first derivative. Okay. So dy dx is y prime. We get that. So now we can take the second derivative of something. So in other words, y prime prime or y double prime is the derivative of y with respect to x. So in other words, we take the derivative of the derivative. And when we do that, we get this terminology here. So the second derivative of y with respect to the second derivative of x is the idea. So y prime, y double prime, f double prime, and the second derivative of y with respect to x means I'm just taking the derivative twice. We can even do a third derivative. We rarely do that in this class. So we could take it. So we can just keep taking derivatives. So let's just take y equals x to the fourth plus x cubed. Y prime, 4x cubed plus 3x squared. Y double prime, 12x squared plus 6x. Y triple prime, 24x plus 6. Y, the fourth derivative, I don't even know. Y quadruple prime, I don't know, is 24. So we can keep going until we're done. So that's all they mean by taking the first and second derivatives over and over again. Same idea here. We just can keep going over and over. So don't worry about the second and higher order derivatives. We just deal with those. The nth derivative could be like y to the, not y, y equals x to the 3/5. We've already talked about those. So that's an nth power. So we're not worried about those. And so our assignment today is out of the book. If you don't have an online book, we need to get you set up. We're going to do 1 through 27 odd, 13 through 27 odd. The directions say graph. Don't worry about the graphs. And then 29 through 33 odds, but throw in 32 there. And then we'll talk a little bit about this stuff in class tomorrow also. So that's the basic intro.